welcome to InclusionFX panel number 4, focusing on video games, underrepresented people representing, and we are here. So today we have Natasha Darnell. Natasha, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi. Well, I'm lucky enough to have been in the games industry for over 15 years. I managed to find a start in Trivial Pursuit online, and casual gaming was exactly where I wanted to be. And then spent several years in the mobile games industry, where working in mobile games was incredibly challenging before there were smartphones. And finally moved into making tools and other platform services for other people who made games, and I thought that was really fun too. So since then, I've been working in startups, and I've led product for a couple of startups. And I think product management is where it's at for me. So I'm a product manager, and product managing is a role that didn't exist when producing games 20 years ago was being a producer. So one day I went to my boss and I said, I think I'm a product manager. And in the games industry, that didn't really exist until a thing called freemium came around. And that's actually what I included myself, because being a product manager in the games industry in freemium is just very different from producing games on their own.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Natasha. We're going to go next to Jenna. Ruth.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to be here. So hi, everybody. I'm Jenna Ruth. I'm a Los Angeles native, and I guess, I've been really into games my whole life, but I only found out that you could make them for a living like in my 20s. So after that, I ended up going to school for it. I went to Noman with Ren, who you're also going to meet. And I started out as an environment artist, and I discovered at my first job out of school at this indie startup that I actually love VFX. So I made the transition to doing visual effects for games, and I joined Insomniac. And so I've gotten to work on Spider-Man and Miles Morales and now Ratchet and Clank. And it's just absolutely been a blast working on those games.
Thanks so much, Jenna. Next we have Ren Cromwell.
Hi, my name is Ren Cromwell, and I'm a character artist. I'm currently at Treyarch. And like Jenna, I've always been into video games. I've played video games my whole life. I think I told Audrey that my dad bought us like a Sega Genesis when I was a kid, and that was it, like games. But I went to the Nova School of Visual Effects, and really got to do like a deep dive into 3D art. So I really fell in love with 3D modeling. I had been an illustrator prior to that. That's graphic design work, and I still consider myself an illustrator. But my day job is character artist. So it's been great. Fresh out of school, I got to work with a lot of small teams on VR projects, and VR was fun. It was fun. It was really cool working with experimental technology, because a lot of it was very experimental at the time. And eventually I went to work at Treyarch, and since then I spent about 3 years or so now, but been working on Call of Duty games. So Black Ops 4, Black Ops Cold War is the most recent, and it's been really awesome. It's do what you love.
Thanks so much. Next we have Junko.
Hi, my name is Junko Nakamura, and I have been in the video games industry for over 15 years now. And I started my career as a QA tester at Activision many years ago, and sort of evolved my career from there, meandering throughout the way, with localization, just general production, got to work on many major titles like The Simpsons Tapped Out, Guitar Hero, obviously console and mobile. I also worked on the PS4 hardware itself, more specifically the What's New interface was my group's responsibility. So throughout the years, I've had a lot of great experiences with so many different types of people and talent. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I enjoy what I do. And I mean, it's very challenging sometimes, but I love it. And it's my niche. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
That's me.
Thank you. Sam.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm down here in New Zealand, and I have been a gamer since my early teens. We've got a creative studio which we started about 18 years ago, working in the creative tech sector, and over the years we've been developing a lot of new technology, and so gaming was something that we've been wanting to kind of explore a lot more of in terms of our own original IP. So a few years ago we started looking at that a little bit more seriously, and we have a game studio which called M Theory, which we started looking at a VR game, which we have just released a trailer for a couple of days ago, called Wanderer. So pretty exciting to be able to actually go from playing games to working in sort of the peripheral space, working with clients and service, to actually looking at original IP. So it's been a really interesting journey for us, and looking forward to seeing how that goes, and how today goes as well.
Great. Thanks so much. Arcadia.
Good morning, everyone. I'm calling in from Hong Kong. It's such a pleasure to serve on this wonderful panel with you guys. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Arcadia. I'm the founder and president of a company called Infinite Screen Time. And I think of this as my sort of third chapter of this incredible.
Yeah.
Does that work now?
Yeah, now it's working. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So sorry about that. Technology is always such a pain in the butt whenever you're trying to do something. So Infinite Screen Time is a nonprofit organization that's focusing on dispelling the negative connotations of screen times to try to recast it in something positive and connective for families. And this is the third chapter of my journey because it's really, Infinite Screen Time has really been informed by my first and second chapter, which my first chapter is working in the video game industry. And so I started working in the video game industry at Electronic Arts back in 2000. And I love hearing about all these various games that people have been working on because there's so much overlap. I actually started at EA right out of business school as a line producer, sort of helping EA do their integration for Pogo, which was a casual online game. And so when they first did the acquisition of it, and so that's where I started, and then had the honor of working on this little-known online video game called Majestic, which is a little bit ahead of its time. And then after that, I really cut my production teeth as a development director for the Lord of the Rings movie games, and working on that entire series was such an incredible experience, not only about building a franchise, but also building a really great team. And then I got to work, and this is the kind of, I guess, what you get to do when you're at EA. I then worked I went over to Maxis and worked on Sims and Sims 2, and then had the honor then to move over to the Los Angeles studio. And there I was the chief operating officer. And I worked on, what did I work on there? Command and Conquer, Medal of Honor, a whole bunch of movie games. And that's where Audrey and I met. We sort of set up the whole kind of operations around localization as well as outsourcing. And, that was when kind of video games was really turning into these blockbuster sort of titles. And then I decided to retire because I was 39 weeks pregnant with my first child, and I really wanted to focus on that chapter too. And through that time, I think the industry has just exploded in so many ways. We can carry around these games wherever we go. And as a sort of ex-game maker and then turned mom, I really then started to see how there needed to be more education and just more, I guess, a softer language, right, around video games, especially in families, on how to deal with what I think is, I don't want to say legitimate. We all knew it was a legitimate form of play, right? But something that I think a lot of families don't realize how amazing it can be. And so that was the genesis of my chapter 3.
Thanks so much, Arcadia. And last but not least, we have Rita Garcia. Hi, Rita.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Rita Garcia. I'm the odd one out. I never worked in the game industry. I worked 15 years in the movie industry. There's a lot of cross-pollination across the two. I spent 15 years working in the movie industry. I was at Pixar. My first movie was The Incredibles. Went on to work at Weta, and then finally at Marvel Studios. I'm currently a lecturer at the University of Adelaide in Australia, and my focus is on computer science education. Some of the things I noticed while working in industry, such as planning, question asking, collaboration, some of those challenges are the things that I focus on now in education.
That's perfect. And thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you guys here and talking with us. So let's get right to it. So I want to talk a little bit about representation in the game space. And I know the statistics for people of color in the game space is a little dire. I believe it's like 2 or 3% out of the entire gaming force that we are represented. So Sam, I want to start with you and ask you how has your journey been? And I know you've been blazing a trail. I just want to hear a little bit more how you've been working through that.
How long have you got? No. We're talking about representation, right?
Cliff Notes version, Sam.
Yeah, okay, quick. No, so look, it's really interesting because I guess there's a couple of different sides to it, and being a woman and person of color in this space. There's one side is representation within the teams themselves, which I think will help the second side, which is also representation in the content. So I think over the years, and it's been really interesting on a couple of games that we're doing at the moment, and one's a smaller game sort of for a children audience for an online platform here in New Zealand, and one's a larger sort of what we want to be a blockbuster game. But just really interesting in the way that things play out in terms of representation and how we can make sure that both women and people of color are represented, in the little things like even, for our smaller game, the ability to, so you can create a character, making sure that different aspects of characters are available to do that, different skin colors, hair color, eye color, all of that, and just making sure that's part of it. One of the things that when we were, developing it is the automatic need, regardless of who's developing the game, of having the default as a white-skinned male with blonde hair. It was just really interesting to see, when you start the game and you create your character, that's the default. So one of the first things we did is said, let's randomize this. Let's make sure. And it's little things like that. With a larger game, with Wanderer, we explore history. We time travel back in history. And again, there were a few things that when we started writing the story, I noticed that there were a lot of, again, white males is, you're the key character. There were a lot of other key characters. And I was like, look, what about women and women in history and playing as a woman? Especially in VR, I think, you get to see your hands in VR and looking down at your hands, and my hands aren't white, or male, maybe sometimes male hands, but, looking down at them and kind of going, what does that look like? So the hard thing also is looking for content. So I just wanted to talk very quickly about this, but the off balance that we've had in that not a lot of historical content is about women. So then trying to find that content to embody women back in history is really hard. So I think, because it's been such a long time, it's like exponential. It's grown over time, but there's more and more content about men. And so we need to probably go off balance a bit to bring that balance back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Now, Ren, you talked a little bit before about, being a character artist, dealing with your team. Like how is that approached on an asset level when you're building your the look and feel of your characters?
I know in general, the big important thing, like no matter what your character is, whether it's for work, whether it's on my personal work, research is really important. Making sure that whatever your character is, whether they're a real person or they've been designed by a concept artist, just making sure that you are being respectful, that you are doing research, that you're faithful as much as possible, just to the spirit of the character, that you're not doing something that's like could be seen as like some weird stereotype, or you're not using like colors that are appropriate. Like when putting like makeup on a character, I make sure that my colors are very well chosen, that it's flattering, that it looks good. That when we work on things like hair, I do a lot of hair, making sure that hair types are well represented, that they're very accurate. Getting photo reference and just looking at life and just being sort of a student of people, and observing real people and getting feedback. And that no matter what kind of artist you are, you can't work in a bubble. Because you know how it is when you've been working on something for 8, 12 hours and you're just like, I can't see this right side up anymore. So also getting feedback from different types of people is very good. And that plays, your art gets woven with the narrative. And so that's very important, is that you have that connection between narrative and your art, and making sure that you're showing you're putting sort of everything best foot forward.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's good. So talking about representation and treatment. So Junko, I want to ask you. You spent some time, on multiple, with Japanese companies and American companies, and I want to, if you could tell us a little bit about your journey and your perspective and how you were treated. Any different?
Sure. Yeah, it was a challenge when I was first starting out in the industry, mainly because I grew up with traditional Japanese parents, and they're very much focused on education and a reputable career. And so video gaming is not really part of that, that whole package. So when I did decide to pursue video games, I heard a lot, but I still persisted, and I knew that it was something that I loved, so I had to go for it. So when I started as a tester, it was really great. There was just no pressure. I was finding bugs and really enjoying the people that I was meeting. And from there, I went to Namco Bandai, where I worked on Pac-Man games, and more of my Japanese language came into play. And I was very much immersed in my heritage culture. So when I decided to become a fangirl, or be a fangirl, and basically jump to Guitar Hero, which is one of my favorite franchises, I went back to Activision, and I must say that it was a bit of a culture shock at first, mainly because I didn't find anybody else that really looked like me or had any cultural background like me. And as an Asian person, I was basically raised to be demure and submissive, being female, and I'm not really supposed to speak out too much. But when I was at Activision, it was mainly told to me that I needed to speak up more and be assertive. And, I was amongst the ranks of the boy club. And so I had to learn how to balance my cultural background as well as my career background. I had to kind of separate the two and be more of what the American culture really wanted me to be. Not only that, but to be part of that bro culture, which is video gaming in general, was very challenging. So yeah. I would like to help mentor younger women or men, anyone who is willing to, dive into this industry like I did, and need any guidance. I'm happy to help.
Oh, thank you so much, Junko. So Jenna, you work in a very, technical field in visual effects, especially high-end visual effects. Was that route easy for you? Or, your work spoke for itself?
I'd say now, I'm in a place where I'm pretty comfortable with the tools and with my teammates, but it's really interesting you bring up the technical angle, because for the longest time, I had a really hard time thinking of myself as a visual effects artist, because I had internalized this idea that I'm an artist and I don't do the math science stuff. And I'm sure part of that is gendered, which is what I think we should be changing from a younger age as well. And so it really took me a while to embrace the idea of I myself in this technical role, and And like, definitely that's something I try to tell younger people now, is like not to think of like math, science, and art as two separate things, because you can absolutely use one to create the other. So yeah, that's been like the biggest thing for me, coming to terms with that and embracing that, and realizing that the role doesn't mean you have to look a certain way or, you know, be part of a certain group.
No, that sounds great. You're absolutely right, and I'm glad you broke your own glass ceiling. That's great. So, Arcadia, I want you to talk a little bit about your work-life balance. You know, kind of melding all three of your worlds. You know, and what that stage looks like for you, and making that decision. You know, because we worked together. You know, we worked hard, played hard over there at EA, and you know, just talk us a little bit about that thought process and why you decided to retire at the ripe old age of 30-something.
Well, you know, back when I was COO, I used to always talk about how the assets of our company would walk in and out the door every single morning and every single afternoon, and sometimes late evenings, right? And, you know, oftentimes when you're thinking about a production, you're thinking about all of these, you know, all of these wonderful people, right, who have these incredible talents contributing to sort of this one piece of content, right? And when you're, you know, a line producer, you're basically looking at people like almost like widgets, right? And how do we fit these things together to be able to deliver something? And I think that really does a disservice to the fact that, you know, like Junko, you're just talking, everybody like Jenna and Junko, you're just talking about your individual path of self-revelation, right? As you're doing the work, right? And it has a lot to do with your personal identity, where you're going, how you want to develop, and you don't know the future, right? As an individual. And so, you know, I think that in there lies the crux of the challenge of how do you balance work and life and then still deliver good things, right? And I would always come back to the idea that if you're not feeling chill and comfortable, like getting a good night's sleep, feeling balanced, you're not going to clock in a good day of work, right? And I have to be completely honest, right? At the end of my career there at EA, I could not fathom how I could raise a family and do the type of work that job demanded of me. And when I calculated how I wanted to be present as a mom, and it's kind of funny because, again, I'm trying to define what that journey was. I had no idea what it was going to be like to be a mom, right? I just had this idea that it's going to be this one way. I mean, it turned out it's actually a lot harder than being the COO of a video game company. I mean, at least it was for me. Maybe I had to like reduce my standards, I think. But anyway, I think I just could not fathom how I could do that job the way that I had been doing it before, right? And then kind of fit this other piece into my life. And so I felt like, you know what, I want to do this next chapter to the best of my ability, right? And so I was like, I'm going to let this part go, right? And do I look back at that and kind of, you know, are there moments of like tinges of regret? Because I see how the industry has grown. I see how my colleagues have grown. I've seen where I was at the stage of my life for the age that I was, right? And the opportunities that I had. So is there a tinge of regret? Yes, sometimes, right? Because you kind of wonder, right, how things would have played out if things were different. And so I kind of come back to, and this was something when I was there, I tried, but at the same time, I didn't have that wealth of knowledge and journey, right? Yeah. And so it takes very deliberate, extremely focused mentorship, right? It takes something where you're almost rebelling against the structure, right? And I don't know what the video game industry is like. I know a little bit because I still keep in touch with all my colleagues. In fact, I joke, my brother is in the video game industry as well, right? And so we call it like a family, business, right? And so it takes this sort of really focused idea of, I am going to bring this one person that I see in my organization up, right? And I'm going to try to explain to them what's happening next, right? And you build this little network and you build this little tree and you just keep on pushing that along, right? And when, because it's hard, man, it's hard making movies. It's hard making games. Like this is not, for the faint-hearted, if you know what I mean, right? This industry is not.
And look, Arcadia, I remember, when you came to EA, the studio, and you pulled me aside and you're like, hey, there's not many women here. I'm going to let's just get together and talk about, how we can support each other. And I was really excited about that.
Well, there was not many women of color, right?
No, that's true.
And
that's true.
Yeah, I would joke. I don't know how many exec staff meetings. And then they would pull out, we're talking EA here, right? They'd start pulling out the sports metaphor. And I'd just be like, I'm out. I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about, right? Like, right? And so, there's a conversation that's gendered. There's a conversation that's white. There's a conversation underlying without, and we're talking colleagues that we love, enjoy. Like, I spent more time with my colleagues than I did with any of my friends back in those days. Yeah. They don't realize it. And it takes courage to basically call people out, right? And be like, this language is unfair. It puts me at a disadvantage. You're not understanding where I'm coming from. And so, and since then I've also worked at EA Korea, and others. There's a cultural aspect too, right? Like what Junko was talking about when you're working in Japan. I'm Korean as well. Like you're working back in your head. There's a whole nother layer that's happening across the world, right? That needs this kind of conversation of a recognition of this diversity. And let's face it, diversity makes these games better. It makes these properties better. It makes them much more worldwide. It makes them richer, right? And so, it takes courage. It takes focus. It takes, like, I got to put it on my to-do list kind of, day to day, every day.
I just wanted to touch on something really quickly that we were talking about, that you were talking about, Arcadia, around family and sort of the pressure around that. And I think that's a really interesting point because who I am includes the passion I have for the field that I work in and for the work that I do. So I think there's this kind of, this traditional point of view that if you're going to be a mum or you're going to have a kid, that you'll probably step away from work. And to be honest, that wasn't, for me, I wanted to continue, it wasn't something that was going to be one or the other. And I guess that's another thing that I think that gets assumed on women a lot more than men. And I think we need to start changing that as well, because not that you get ostracized necessarily for choosing work over career, but there's you can have both and you can enjoy both, So I was kind of like a couple of months in before, it was kind of like, I need to get back into work. And I remember doing a workshop after 8 weeks and I was sleep deprived. I was, I'd left my partner with our son with a whole lot of instructions, and I ran a workshop, and it was one of the best things I did at the time to pull me out of a state where I was like, who am I? And I think that part really drives me as well. Like that makes up who I am. And I want to have both, and I try and have both, I'm lucky I'm been in a relationship where it's never been sort of as one-sided, along the way. But regardless of that, I think that's another thing we have to look at is we shouldn't have to, if you don't want to, give up that part of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I should note, because I don't want EA to be coming back to me. EA was very encouraging. Like they wanted me to stay. Like they were like, what can we do, Arcadia? How do we get you to stay? And obviously it's also, that was the other event, I was probably one of the few female women of color on the exec staff. Right. And, to see me leave, I think was probably, really challenging for the company. Also, it was something that they did not want to have happen. Right. But I want to reflect on that because, Sam, I do think as women, we do have choices, right? We've got absolute choices to command our lives in what we want to do, right? And that might have been a reflection, quite frankly, of where the company was, where I felt like, am I safe here? Like, can I do this, right? And I think that's an important thing to note. I didn't make that decision as an idea of giving up, right? But as a decision of like, you know what? I'm putting myself right above every other pressure that's around me, right? And I'm gonna do this for myself. And I think that's something that I look back and I don't regret at all, right? You know, what I do regret is like all the money I could have been making.
And I think that's important, but isn't it? Yeah.
No, but I mean, I say that as a joke, but I, you know, all the other richness, we don't know the choices that we make, right?
Yeah.
And I think that those individual choices are absolutely our own, and I think that's an important thing to reflect on.
Yeah. That sounds great. So Rita, I want to talk to you a little bit about where, you know, I know you haven't had an experience in games, but you definitely have taken a journey, you know, going back to education. I know part of our path to change and diversify the industry is starting with the younger people who know this is possible and to give them a safe space to work in once they reach. So I want to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it's good that companies are recognizing that a diverse work group is productive, it's healthy, but some places say, well, we're just going to hire more women. And it's not that easy because they're not coming through the education system in balance. There is a disparity in female computer science, software engineering students. And that's really odd because a lot of countries right now, they're starting to set up in the K through 12 systems, computing, critical thinking curriculum. So there's a balance of that being shown at K through 12 from the boys and girls, yet at the tertiary level, it's mainly, again, boys. So why is that? A lot of times, girls, women look to mentors more than boys and male students. So providing mentorship could probably help with that. Having those extra groups like Python chicks or girls who code and these communities to kind of promote it. Another issue is self-efficacy. They notice that their male students are much more better at computers than they are. So they feel a bit more, well, what's wrong with me? This self-efficacy issue. And it's not them. It's just that sometimes the boys are encouraged to stay inside and play video games and do computers. And now a lot of the fathers, they are programmers and they're teaching their boys that instead of going out and fixing the cars, they're going out and learning how to program with their dads. While the girls have a lot more activities. They're dancing, they're doing art, they're cooking, and so their time is not as focused on a particular area. And so they're not as, so by the time they get to the university level, they don't have that as much confidence when they're sitting in that room of 400 people to do some of that stuff independently. Yeah. So having these external groups would kind of help with that. But also when you go into industry, fostering and trying to retain your female group would be something else that needs to be looked at because they are experiencing microaggressions in the workplace. Sometimes you don't feel included in the conversation with your peers. And I think like what Arcadia was saying is that you spend a lot of time with these people. And if the conversation is something that you're excluded from, why do you want to stay there? And so they've noticed that a lot of women, that they notice that women do leave the industry, not because they have children, they're leaving before that. And so these types of things also have to be looked at the, in the industry level as well.
Yeah, no, agreed. No, that's fantastic, you guys. Is there anything else anybody wants to contribute before we sign off?
I wanted to tell a story about my choice to become a mother because it wasn't one that I took easily. When I was already in the games industry, I was no stranger to 1 a.m. What I was a stranger to was dinner at home. And I took my job at Jamdat Mobile knowing that I needed to find my way in my career before I could make the choice to be a mom. And I got straight into that, working all the weekends, answering all the emails, being part of the whole scene. And I actually traveled to Europe and worked all the time, launching Tetris day and date with the United States on phones that we just couldn't launch anywhere else. And I left my husband at home. You can't get pregnant when you leave your husband at home. This doesn't work like that. So eventually, when I finally got out of enough of the stress level of working on that roller coaster, you launch a game and then another one starts, or you're launching 30 games a year and you're never calming down. I moved into working in platform, and that let me just cool down a little bit, enough to finally be able to settle. And my body said it was okay to be a mom. Mm-hmm. And when I was pregnant, I would once a week go to a pregnancy yoga class for which I had to leave the office at 6:30, as opposed to 9 or 10. And 9 or 10 was my norm of going home. And I did that so that I could practice actually ever going home at a normal time, because I knew that was going to be a great big shift in my life. And since then, being a mom means in large part just choosing which thing you're going to work on at any time. I never have any time to myself, but I am either with my kids or I'm with my job. And that's what I do. I just now split it. And it was only lucky that I had been at EA the full 7 years when my daughter was born that I could connect my maternity leave with my sabbatical. Yes. And that allowed me to be off work for a full 6 months while I had a 2-year-old and an infant in my arms, and then go back to work. And within my first week or two, I flew up to EARS, the Redwood Shores office, with a pump on the plane, did a day of meetings, and I was like, oh, I guess this is what it is now. And I just went for it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. Well, listen, you guys, I loved hearing your stories. You guys have been fantastic. I definitely understood that motherhood journey. I was with your Arcadia, lugging my little kid around in those little hallways. I
know. She was like a little mascot running around on the Saturdays, terrorizing everyone. It was awesome.
Poor little baby.
That's what you got. That was the reality, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I get it. It was not easy, but we do what we have to.
You do it. You do what you have to.
We're parents, but listen, you guys, thank you so much for sharing your incredible stories, and we so appreciate you. And thank you so much. You guys have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, and until next time, thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It was wonderful meeting you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.